We begin tonight with the final stretch with just 32 days to go until Election Day and early voting underway in more than half of all states. We are seeing a remarkable contrast between the two candidates and their coalitions. On one side, you have Vice President Kamala Harris, who today made multiple stops across the key battleground state of Michigan. Just moments ago, the vice president finished up a rally in the city of Flint where she spoke about unions, touted today's strong jobs report, and slammed her opponent's record on manufacturing jobs.
Donald Trump makes big promises, and he always fails to deliver. He said he was the only one who could bring back America's manufacturing jobs. Remember that? And then America lost nearly 200,000 manufacturing jobs when he was president, making Donald Trump one of the biggest losers of manufacturing jobs in American history.
And on the other side, you have Donald Trump, who yesterday also held a campaign event in Michigan where he gave yet another unhinged, meandering speech filled with lies to what appears to be a half-empty auditorium. Now, this is a video of that event space posted by a reporter, just as Trump was taking the stage. Not the best look for a guy who has spent the better part of the past 9 years constantly obsessing over crowd size, something Vice President Harris was able to use against him in last month's debate, striking a nerve after pointing out that people are often seen leaving his rallies. This time, it looks like they're not even showing up. The Washington Post has new reporting today on why some of the rally attendees trickle out before Trump is done speaking. Among their reasons, the fact that Trump is often late and goes long, prompting many to bow out because of other responsibilities, priorities, or just being bored and no more interest. One attendee, Anastasia Bennett, said she quickly grew tired of the insults and was ready to leave. The Post notes Bennett was undecided before attending the rally with her aunt, who supports Harris. But after hearing Trump speak, she said she planned to vote for Harris. Quote, "It was the insults and just being an hour late." Now, watching people leave as Trump is still droning on for more than 90 minutes is very symbolic of the effect he's had on the party as a whole. Lifelong Republicans walking out in droves, lining up behind Kamala Harris, who is presiding over an exceptionally large and diverse coalition. Not only does she have the support of the Democratic Party, but she also has endorsements from Republicans like Liz Cheney, as well as labor leaders, celebrities, and athletes, like basketball legend Magic Johnson, who spoke at Harris's rally today.
She's smart. She's strong. She's passionate. Nobody's going to outwork her. She's committed to you as the people of the United States, the people of Michigan. She's committed to you.
I'm joined now by Jonathan Allen, NBC News senior national politics reporter, Sarah Matthews, former Trump White House deputy press secretary, and Alyncia Johnson, founder of 1063 West Broad and former Biden-Harris 2020 senior advisor, and the author of the upcoming book, Flip the Tables. I like that title. Welcome to everybody. So, you know, there are 1,001 places to start, but Alyncia, I'm going to start with you. In this coalition building aspect of what we're seeing the vice president do, and really, I mean, in 75 days out of the 107 that she has to do this campaign, she's been able to amass an incredible array of support, but most importantly from folks like Liz and Dick Cheney and a whole group of Republicans. How does that play out across the country from where you're sitting and how you're seeing the race unfold?
Listen, never in my life did I think I would be sitting here as a Democrat saying that we have a coalition full of everyone, including the Cheneys, right? Like, no Democrat wants to admit that they have the Cheneys on their side, right? But, you know, it's showing that there are so many people in this country who are ready to move past Donald Trump, including people in the Republican Party. And I'm not a Republican, but I have heard that, and you have said that. But I also, you know, it shows that there are so many parts of the American people that we can organize in order to show up to vote. You know, they're picking between the couch and Kamala Harris. I will say, I think it is important for Democrats to not solely focus on just the Republicans who don't want to vote for Kamala Harris, and that's why they're building with, you know, coalitions of black folks, coalitions of young people, of, you know, hopefully getting the undecided voters. But I do think this is showing people that there is this desire to not only move past him, but put this country over the partisan politics, because it's more than Donald Trump that people want to get rid of. It is this nastiness that is in our politics that, you know, it's part of the reason why some people think they enjoy Tim Walz on The Debate, because they saw this way to have civility with someone you not only disagree with, but somebody who's lying with a smile. But you saw a bit of the civility to talk across the aisle and discuss the issues without all of these insults that, you know, you were just showing that that voter was tired of Donald Trump doing.
I thought that insult aspect from that one person, Ms. Bennett, who was at the rallies, Sarah, and was just turned off by that. And listening to what she was saying, I couldn't help but think about all the things that have led up to this point, and particularly focusing on Dick Cheney and the fact that he is not on that stage with Donald Trump because of a lot of the things that Donald Trump wanted him to do, and then just turning on him the way he did. I took note of the fact that Liz Cheney at her endorsement rally with the vice president had this to say about Mike Pence yesterday. Let's take a quick listen.
Our institutions also held because of Vice President Mike Pence, who refused to violate his oath to the Constitution. And that is why Mike Pence is not Donald Trump's running mate today.
I mean, to Alencia's point about the Cheneys, I mean, to hear Democrats in a hall applauding Mike Pence, I mean, really speaks to the time, because and you're very much involved in this space. Putting the country first at this moment has been a critical aspect of not just what Republicans are saying, but how the Harris campaign has picked up that mantle. What are you seeing and hearing out there as you're going around the country and trying to make the case not just to Republicans, but also to Democrats, and having someone as an example like Mike Pence to say, hey, this is the right space to be in?
Yeah, I think our country owes, obviously, a lot of gratitude to Mike Pence for the courage that it took to make that decision on January 6th and to break with Donald Trump. Obviously, it hurt him career-wise. He had aspirations to be president one day. That's likely never going to happen, at least in today's Republican Party. And same goes for Liz Cheney. I mean, she is truly a patriot. She understands what it means to put country first. And there should be a line of men behind her who should be out there doing the same and sounding the alarm about Donald Trump, because I know full and well that all of these Republican elected officials know that what she's saying is true, but they don't have the courage to stand up there and do it. And she has more courage than all of them combined in her pinky toe. So I am just honored to know her and call her a mentor. But she is out there making the case because she knows that Kamala Harris and her might disagree on policy, but at the end of the day, what they do agree on is the need to protect democracy. And the stakes are too high in this election, and she knows that she's not going to sit on the sidelines and let Donald Trump waltz back into the Oval Office. And I get a lot of pushback from some Republicans when we say that we're going to set policy aside in this election. I'm a Republican who has endorsed Kamala Harris for president. And if you would have told me that I'd be voting for her in 2024, 4 years ago, I would have thought you were crazy. But I also didn't think an insurrection at our nation's capital was possible. I didn't think that we'd ever have a president who would try to disrupt the peaceful transfer of power. And so for me, yes, it is hard to put aside policy, but I tell these people, well, doesn't character matter? Doesn't the Constitution matter? These are things that I want in a leader, someone who will uphold the Constitution and defend it, someone who will be an inspiration to the young children across this country and be a really true leader for them. And Donald Trump has shown us that he is wholly unfit to ever serve office ever again.
So speaking of the grind, Jonathan, you're out there grinding on the beat, trying to tap into the movement that is happening, that's coursing between the presidential campaigns, but certainly that folks themselves are sort of focusing on these campaigns the way they have, or at least starting to, as we wound up this the last 30 days. You've got the Harris campaign meeting with a group of Arab Americans in Michigan today. With the before her rally, she wanted to sort of have that conversation with Muslim and Arab American community leaders to talk about supporting her and what that looks like. She's really trying to pull all these pieces together